think I'm the only person in the country who has a Land Cruiser with a 3-rack shoe rack in the back of it, simply because you can't open gates on a property with stilettos. I'm very pleased to be here this morning, and thank you to CEDA. It's terrific that you look to put on these regional events. It's really important to hold events such as this in the regions themselves, because not only do you attract people who are interested in regional economic development, but you also attract people who are actually based in those regions. And it's very much about how you actually can get people in the regions who live, work and play there to take ownership of their future. It's not about other organisations to actually say this is what we think is best for you. It's about the communities themselves saying this is how we want to actually shape our future. So what I'm going to do today is really just give you a very quick overview of the RAI's work, some of the work in progress, some of the changes that we're seeing in the Pure region, engaging with population trends. That's certainly a piece of work we've been doing in partnership with Department of Regional Development over here in WA, and preparing for growth and change, the sort of things you can do there. And just for those of you who may not know, the Regional Australia Institute is an independent policy think tank. It is the only policy think tank for regional Australia, and we see ourselves as being the link between research, policy and implementation. So we certainly draw on a lot of research that is already existing. We look to undertake the research where we need to have that evidence-based policy, and we work with local governments, regional development authorities around the country in terms of implementation. But we very much focus on that policy influence side. So just a quick look at some of the work that we've got in progress at the moment, and I'll come back to those first three, but the future of regional Australia is the next piece of work we're doing, and this is very much about how we can look at future scenarios based on the data we know for each region at the moment. And that piece of work will actually look at best case scenario, worst case scenario, and the status quo for each region. Not about predicting the future, but really about what can we do to be able to empower and embrace a region, to be able to ensure that when change happens, and change will continue to happen, they're ready, flexible and positioned to be able to go with those future trends. We've done some interesting work comparing a couple of regions in New South Wales at the moment, and we're going to be doing some more case studies. What it shows in that comparison is that regions can have a very similar competitiveness profile, but be on completely different trajectories. And a lot of that can come down to local leadership, confidence, the extent to which a region may be forward-thinking, looking to the future, not looking over their shoulder and saying, wouldn't it be great if we could actually turn back the clock 20 years? So some of that work has actually been really interesting. Our work on better government in regional Australia is really looking at the challenges we have at the moment about government service delivery, particularly in health and education. And that's very challenging for government, but one of the things we're saying is it can't be centrally driven. Is there another way that we can actually flip that model so we get a better from the ground up type of implementation, because it's really people at the local level that know best about how these policies can actually be implemented. And then we've got specific Western Australian projects. Work on our population growth that I'll be drawing on this morning, we're calling Pathways to Settlement. That's already been released. We are just about to release some work on regional cities and non-place-based work trends, which will be very interesting looking at that for the Pure region, given, of course, that non-place work is something that is quite predominant here in this region. And access to finance is another piece of work that we're doing that will come out later this year. So the first piece of work I just want to tell you that we've released recently, which is one of our iconic products called Inform. Now, Inform is an online research library. It's all of the research done on regional Australia since the year 2000. We have just updated it and released that in the last few weeks. We've now got around 2,000 pieces of research there. It allows anyone that's actually looking for where there may be some research on a particular topic, go online, just put in your research topic, just, you know, whether it might be aged care, it might be allied health services, and you'll be able to pull up all of the research that's been done on that particular topic. Very, very easy to get that research, and as I said, we've just recently updated it. But our real iconic product is something called Insight, and this is our Regional Competitiveness Index. So what this is an online map, accessible to anyone. You can go in, and for every LGA in the country, you can pull up data across labour market statistics, across health education, infrastructure, services. We draw on ABS data, My Schools data, Social Health Atlas. We do GIS calculations. So for the first time ever, for all of regional Australia, as well as the cities, so you can do comparisons, you can get the data at your fingertips. We are just about to release the updated version of that in a couple of weeks' time, where we've increased the number of indicators that are available. Basically what it's giving you is over 90,000 different pieces of information on regional Australia that's available in this online map. So I do encourage you to go and have a look at that, because you'll find not only is it a very useful tool, but it does give you that access to ready data wherever you may be. Now let's have a look at what we're seeing in terms of population trends. And Melissa put up a graph in terms of the growth in population here, which is that dotted line. We've actually then had a look at what does it mean for each of the local government areas in the Peel region. And you can see that, you know, the ups and downs that we're seeing there have been triggered by different events. You know, sorry, words have dropped off. That's the first one is construction of the Boddington gold mine. And that's what gave that big jump up in population. And then we can see that there was another jump up after the gold mine reopened. But certainly Boddington has had, you know, that higher than the average for the Peel region in terms of growth. But really it's only, you know, when you look at some of the steadier lines that you're getting there, that you're actually seeing the population in the end, when we look past 2013, is that it's actually starting to come down to that average trend line that Melissa was showing earlier. So what do we see in terms of the future for the Peel region when it looks at population? And this is drawing on a lot of the work that we've done in Western Australia on population trends. First of all, the baby boomers. We call them super boomers because we actually say to the regions, these baby boomers, the people between 50 and 69, they're healthier, wealthier, better educated, more mobile than any other generation that has entered retirement before. These are the people who, when they do retire, they don't just stop life. They actually look to have a next life. They look to embrace change. And so for them, we've renamed them the super boomers. And I can see a super boomer who I know was a proud person to be named a super boomer when I talked to him about the work earlier this year. Hello, Paul, good to see you here. Certainly, you know, those super movers are making the most of that inward migration. They are spending their money. They are looking for their tree change, sea change. So we're actually saying to regions, embrace them. That's what you've got a lot of here in the Peel region. Affordable housing seekers, probably not so a surprise to you, but we actually see a lot of younger people there. So we've done work around the 25 to 44 year age group, and we are seeing that movement from the city, primarily driven by housing affordability, but there's also a bit of a granny factor. So we do see in the regions people who came from the regions, they moved to the city for work, to go to university, they've then started a family and they've actually looked to move back to the region. Once again here in the Peel, because you've got that proximity, it makes it very attractive for them. And then you've also got, of course, within that group, some of the lower income groups that are seeking, you know, those sort of not just housing affordability but safe and friendly communities. Lifestyle migration, once again, proximity really drives this for you. We're really seeing, you know, the ability to have those larger blocks, the ability to be able to have a much better lifestyle, as well as accessibility to work is what's actually driving the population growth here. And then, of course, we've got international migration. And that's something that, once again, when we put out, we've got some further work we're doing on international migration trends all around Australia, and that's the sort of trends we'll start to see and where people are moving and why. Super boomers in the Peel region, what we're seeing, of course, is they are moving out of the city. So those dark blue areas is really where we're seeing the super boomers primarily move to, and then the lighter areas. So you can see, of course, when you get below Perth and they're moving out of Perth, that you're actually seeing quite a large chunk of those baby boomers moving into this area. In fact, what we've got here is one of the highest rates of that particular trend of baby boomers moving down to this Peel region. But as we said, you know, it's not about an ageing problem. We really should look to embrace this group of people. They're your volunteers, they're your mentors, they're your counsellors, they're your great contributors in terms of your regional development. So if we look at the future for the Peel and the economy, there are three key drivers that we see as being certainly trendsetters, and that is industry. And we'll hear more about industry this afternoon. But it's what will a changing economy mean? Particularly with mining being a core driver at the moment, but what will the future be, in terms of, say, food manufacturing, agriculture? We've heard about agriculture, certainly the ability to get water here and the irrigation and what that can mean for future industries. Proximity, we've heard a bit about proximity already this morning. Proximity we see as being a huge opportunity for the Peel region. The proximity to not just the city, but one of the challenges then will be how you actually retain your own identity. And I'll come back to that when I look at the map, once again, that Melissa put up, but some of the questions we had about what does that mean for the Perth city. And then there's size, and we actually asked the question, are we actually playing on the same field, or are there two functional economies in the Peel region? Certainly when you look at Mandurah, the high density living here compared to when you get outside of further out in the Peel region, when you look at the level of population growth you have here, you actually almost could say, are there two different economies in the Peel, and how do we actually deal with that, and what does that mean in terms of the future economic development for the region? What we've started to do now is say, how can you actually build on those three key drivers and say, can we categorise Australia somewhat to help us understand it? That said, we would always say one size doesn't fit all, and certainly when it comes to policy mechanisms, we've always got to think about making sure that each region has its own particular profile. But we actually can look at connected lifestyle regions, which are regions like the Peel that are closer to those major cities. We've got our industry and service hubs predominantly driven by a particular industry. In some ways, you could almost say that Boddington actually has the sort of profile of an industry hub. You've got the heartland regions, probably not so much here in the Peel region, but they tend to be the remote and very remote. So all of those areas, outside of any city. And then you've got your regional cities. And certainly, hearing what we hear about Mandurah being, the largest WA city outside of Perth, regional cities is certainly something that Mandurah shows all the ability to be, diverse economies, and that size and diversity really creates those future opportunities. So if we go to that map, and there was a question asked about, what does it mean around boundaries? And I'm certainly not going to comment on that, but, there is that question about Serpentine Jarrahdale, the extent to which that is very close to Perth. And so in terms of connected lifestyle, you're probably seeing more of that major capital city behaviour in that particular region. When you get out to the east, as I said, you're probably seeing in that Boddington more of an industry hub, but certainly right through Murray and Waroona, you're seeing that clear connected lifestyle and those opportunities that this will bring for your region. Insight, which is our Competitiveness Index, can actually help us map the profile for each of the LGAs in this particular region, and I've got Mandurah, Boddington, Murray and Waroona there. What this tells us is that you've got very good connectivity here. The closer to the outside, the better you're actually performing. For most of those, Waroona just a little bit below that, but of course that reflects its distance really. Labour market efficiency is a really interesting one because that actually reflects employment. And what you're seeing there is in Boddington, certainly you've got the highest levels of employment there, driven by the mine, of course, but you've got some challenges in your other three local government areas. However, economic fundamentals are pretty good. Business sophistication, once again, driven by the mining activity in Boddington is very strong, whereas a bit less so in those other regions. Human capital, once again, what we're seeing is human capital, health, education, very, very important. If we're actually going to look at improving the sustainability of any region, we really do need to focus on those two things. Once again, we heard about that this morning, about making sure we actually get good access to education, because that is so fundamentally important. Interestingly, yesterday I was actually meeting with someone from Hancock Prospecting, and we were talking about the Pilbara and the challenges up there they've had with education. And I said, well, it's interesting because I can look at Wollongong, close to Sydney. They also have challenges there, not so much around the education, but what we're seeing there with the statistics and the data is early childhood performance is much higher in Wollongong than it is in the Pilbara. Youth unemployment, though, is 3 times the amount in Wollongong than it is in the Pilbara. Just trying to put jobs there is only going to help one part of the problem, because when we actually look at early school leavers, we're actually seeing that much higher in the Illawarra. What that means is something's actually happening between primary school and secondary school that's actually leading to that high youth unemployment. So that sort of data, and being able to say the data gives you one part of the story, but then starting to ask the questions why, actually then means in a policy context, we need to actually be thinking about how we treat the actual problem or series of problems that are creating what we're actually seeing in that high youth unemployment. So very important to look at those human capital data and indicators and the labour market efficiency to say what's actually driving that. Infrastructure, however, here is very good, as is access to essential services, and innovation is pretty good as well. So what that says is, and you'll see quite clearly when we say one size fits all, just looking in the Peel region, there are different strengths and challenges for each of the LGAs, but primarily across the whole of the Peel region, you're above average, which means there are great opportunities, great potential. It's just a matter of how do we tap into that. So let's come back to that challenge that we actually see based on the population trend data, based on the competitiveness data, that is a key challenge for the Peel. And that's the question of identity. And that is, how do you become a place to work as well as a place to live? We're clearly seeing all the trends saying that Peel is a great place to live, but you want it to be a place to work as well. Once again, there was a question earlier about relocating government departments. It's an interesting one because when you look at the functions of government, policy versus program, it is much easier to move program to a region. So it's not so much the question of do we move a whole department, but what are parts of that department that are program delivery that would be better placed being based in a region. Once again, what we see is a lot of that program delivery tends to come out of Perth for WA. How would they actually know what the region really needs unless they are actually in the region and working in the region and seeing what those needs can actually be? So certainly that's something to think about. Balancing the need of old and new regional industries. You know, once again, don't look over your shoulder. Look to the future. Agriculture here, we have, given we're one of the highest labour countries in the world, we have a huge opportunity in terms of technology and being able to export that knowledge to other countries, particularly third world countries. When I look at the grains industry here, the leading edge technology we've got in agriculture is enormous. It's the same we see in the north. So let's not just keep thinking about how we've always done things, but how can we actually look to do things in the future? And then how do we actually be connected to Perth but not be overwhelmed by it? So I guess in summary, we'd say that the future of the Peel region is really bright. We see a real opportunity to embrace the change that we see in agribusiness, mining, great opportunity around tourism and healthcare, and of course we're going to be hearing about that a bit more. Great natural resources here. Paddy talked about that this morning. How do we actually leverage off that in this region? Leveraging the technology, there is access to technology, so how do you embrace that, but also help people understand the wonderful opportunities that technology can bring. Making sure you keep an eye on that external environment so you actually can leverage it and turn it to your advantage, and how do you embrace that ageing population so they actually can continue to contribute to what will make the best of your opportunities here. I'll leave it there, but thank you, and I look forward to questions at the end.